All right, we are back once again going over how to work faster. My name is Fox, and today we are going over how to set up your MIDI drums and never have to worry about it again as part of your template. So we have a brand new, not even templified Ableton project, and you want to set up your drums. There's two ways to do it. You set up drums either through samples and audio, or you set up your drums through MIDI. MIDI allows me personally to have more control over what I'm doing in the form of shaping my drums, grouping them, layering them. I started off with audio and using audio where you'd have to copy and paste all over. And then I realized I kept on changing my kicks so much because I was understanding how to pick good kicks. And so once you decide to change your kick, if you're running things in audio, that means you have to delete everything and replace the kick that you just found. If you don't like the kick that you're having in MIDI, you can turn it off or delete it and just replace it with the new sample that you want to use. And already where everything is placed in the MIDI track, it'll just automatically swap that. And that is a lot faster than you having to go ahead and replace everything. First, you open up a brand new MIDI track, Magical. So from there, you want to go to Instruments, and then you want to go to your drum rack. You double click, you can drag, and you'll see immediately what pops up is a whole bunch of grids with corresponding keys to them. These mean nothing. They're simply just placeholders. It does not correlate with any notes whatsoever. It's just a placeholder for what you have to put in there. Next, you want to put in an instrument rack. What this does, and you're going to see a little button right here, it'll expand that. You can drop all of your samples in here, and from there, it'll give you, for each sample, he'll give you a little tiny window of the sample and what you can do to it. So for example, we'll go to some of my kicks. I like that one. Drag, drop. Now, the first thing you see here is that there's 4 kicks. It's a kick loop sample that I have made from one of my previous tracks. What you can do with this, even if it's a loop, and you can incorporate this in anything with a sample using MIDI, is that you can shape it however you want. So we'll do Control-Shift-M. It'll be Command-Shift-M to create a new MIDI clip, and you do quarter notes for a bar, which is where the kick is. If I just dragged it all the way through, it would play as a loop and then stop because it's playing the entire sample. Versus if I went in and actually placed all of the notes to the corresponding location for a kick, you see how it's already looping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth because it's re-triggering. Now, to make sure that nothing sounds weird, if you're using a loop that you want to sample for your drums, there's a little arrow here, and that will drag back the sample so that it's only illuminating what you want to use. There's 3 different settings here, but we want to use one shot because it's only hitting once for every single time a MIDI note triggers it. So now, when we play it, that's it. We got our kick now. What's dangerous though is that if you decide that you want to shorten your kick after you find a kick that you like, you can find that you'll have weird clicks. That's not very pretty. There is a lovely little button called Fade Out. And what that does is it simply starts to fade the end of your sample that you're using so that it doesn't make those weird clicks. And you can get pretty extreme with it. Clicks. No clicks. So there's also another button called Snap. Snap is actually where the, even though you're moving the arrow, it doesn't actually follow exactly where you place it. It auto snaps to where it finds a 0 level. So where the sample meets in the middle of the left and right channels. So if you zoom in here, it's trying to find the most opportune location for you to stop right in the middle. But if you're fading it out, it doesn't particularly matter because that's designed to stop like clicks from happening. So if you uncheck snap, now it'll actually drag perfectly along with the arrow so you can fine tune the length of your kick. And mind you, you can implement this for every sample. Claps, hats, you name it. This is why I love to use MIDI, because you have full control over the sample. So now we have a nice, cute, tight kick. Now the low end's a little gone when I do that, so I'm gonna push out the fade out a little bit, bring it back, and I'm gonna drag it to the right. Maybe a little bit more fade. Nice and tight, versus we have a lot of low end, it's a big kick, and we shorten it a little bit. Nice and punchy, we like that. So the cool thing is now, if we have the base of our kick, we can rename it main kick. Great, everything looks good there. Now let's say we want to add some sort of crispy top to it if we don't like the top that we have. We'll find a percussion instrument, or rather a percussion sample. I kind of like that. And all you have to do is drag it into the instrument rack. And now every single time this MIDI clip plays, it'll be triggered to play both of these notes. And if we hear that, doesn't sound good, but you know it's working. Why would you want to do this? Because the essence of creating really interesting kicks relies on you sampling different kicks and elements and making your own kicks. It's how a lot of producers create their signature sounds. Is a lot of their drums are just experimentation and finding what's best for their sound. So a good way to stop that from happening, from conflicts when you're starting to mash different samples together, is to EQ them. Why do you EQ them? Because your low end on your kick does not want to have any conflict with anything else. And also, as a side note, when you're using samples, you see here that there's a little bit of space before it actually kicks. We want to drag that in so that every single time it kicks, it's right on time. Just little gaps like that can actually ruin a lot of your mixes and a lot of your songs. So just be very careful of that. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I have a preset called 100 cut, and we'll go over that later, where it's an EQ, where if I drag it on any sample or any audio track, it's an automatic preset that will cut things slightly above 100, and I always have freedom to change that. And what that does is it makes sure that none of the low end of that sample is going to conflict with anything else. So with it on, see all this rumble that's essentially being snipped? That's really important because that's conflicting with the rest of our kick, where if we throw an EQ on here just to get a visual on it, see all that? We don't want anything else in that space. That's really, really important. So back to what I was saying. If we get rid of that, we go back here, and you'll notice that it kind of sounds long, and it sounds like a snare being put on top of a kick, which could be, I mean, once again, music's so subjective. It could be for any use that you want. Maybe that's what you're going for, but I want just a little bit of top end. So we want to shorten that baby. We'll go to one shot just to make sure that it's doing its proper work. Still sounds a little weird, but we're going to find a little sweet spot. And we can even shorten it a little bit more. So now we have a nice short right when the kick hits. Now, on top of that, now that you're already layering kicks, the cool thing is, as I said, every single time that this MIDI trigger gets hit while the song's playing, it'll play that. But then you can also start adding effects to all of your different layers that you have on top of your kick. So if I wanted like a very airy sounding reverb that's like, you know, a low wet and a slight decay time and a smaller size, and we can turn off all the effects to make sure that nothing changes each time it gets hit. And then we start to get that sounds pretty good. So now we have a nice solid layer to our kick, and every single time it gets played, I can just like willy-nilly drag it anywhere I want. It'll play both of those layers. Now you can do this with, as I said, every other, like any other sound in your drum rack, and you can do this with a lot of other samples too in any other capacities, but I love to use these for my drums, my claps, my kicks, my hats, you name it, especially everything with percussion. I love to use MIDI. So my challenge after you watch this video, if you want, is to go ahead and finish your drum rack. You want to set up a kick with a drum rack and an instrument rack, and you want to do some layering. Then you want to do a clap, and then you want to do a hat. Here's a couple of tips though. Because the kick has so much low end, what do you do with all the other elements? Well, you don't have to put an EQ inside the sample itself. Rather, if you had a new MIDI track and you call it clap, you can go ahead and EQ the entire thing to make sure that there's no low end conflicting with the kick. So that's my challenge for you as a viewer. Go ahead and do this. If you don't like it, that's okay. I recommend getting some practice with it, and we'll see where it goes from there. Hope you guys liked the video. Have a great day. Stay crazy. Stay foxed.